Given that f of x is x squared minus 16 and g of x is x plus 4, find each of the following. And A asks us to find the domain of each of these things we're about to find, A or B, C, D, and E. So let's actually go ahead and find B, C, D, and E, and then we'll come back to the domain of each. So f plus g of x means that I'm going to take what f is, and I'm going to add what g is. And all I need to do is look for like terms to add together to simplify. So x squared doesn't have anything to add with, x doesn't have anything to add with. Negative 16 plus 4 is negative 12. So f plus g of x is x squared plus x minus 12. Now let's talk about the domain of that. Well, for one thing, it's important to know that the domain of our original functions, since they don't have square roots and they don't have fractions and they don't have logarithms, both of these have domains of all real numbers, which is negative infinity, well, I messed that up, negative infinity to positive infinity. So when we're adding functions together, if they both have domains of negative infinity to positive infinity, that should not change just by adding them. And it shouldn't change by subtracting them or even probably multiplying them. The place we're going to end up with a problem in our domain is going to be when we divide them. So the domain for f plus g is all real numbers, which is negative infinity to positive infinity. When we subtract them, we take x squared minus 16 and we're going to subtract x plus 4. Make sure that you put g in parentheses and that you distribute the negative. Because we're not just subtracting the x, we're subtracting the x and the 4, which means this is minus x minus 4. And now we add like terms. So x squared minus x minus 20. And again, our original domains for our functions were all real numbers. This is still not a fraction, still not a square root, so our domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. Now let's multiply f times g. So x squared minus 16 times x plus 4. Since there are two terms in each of these parentheses, I'm going to do what we call FOIL. So we take the first term in each parentheses and multiply it together. X squared times x is x cubed. Outer is x squared times 4. Inner is negative 16 times x. And last is negative 16 times 4, which is negative 64. Check and see if there's any like terms to add, and in this case they're not, which means this is f times g of x. Our domain is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity because we don't have any square roots or fractions. Now f divided by g. So remember that division and fractions are the same thing. And so we're going to put x squared minus 16 over x plus 4. So what we need to do is ask ourselves, what is the domain of this function? And so the domain of this function is all real numbers except for where the bottom of our fraction equals 0. And so that happens at x equals negative 4, which means our domain is going to be from negative infinity to negative 4 and from negative 4 to positive infinity. That's how we write this in interval notation, is that we're going all the way to negative 4, but we put a parentheses because it's not equal to, and then we start back up at negative 4 and go to infinity. Now we can simplify this as long as we keep in mind what our domain is. If we simplify this, then we have to factor the top into x plus 4, x minus 4. and then we can see the x plus 4's cancel out, leaving us with x minus 4. So f divided by g is the line x minus 4 where there is a hole at -4. Last part f is g times g of x, and so we would just take x plus 4 times x plus 4 and multiply that together. So if it was f times f or g times g, if they use the same letter twice, you just use the same function twice. So this would be foiling x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16, and then add the middle terms together. And it doesn't ask us what the domain is, but again, no fractions, no square roots, so this is all real numbers for this domain.